Wrestling Podcast.
Welcome everybody to a new episode of the European Wrestling Podcast. Today, my guest is gonna be another Canadian. Last week I had Starbuck, and this week is gonna be no other than Joey Legend, which is another Canadian that moved from North America to Europe. Joey Legend, besides being a former WWE and TNA wrestler, is also well known for being a world traveler. He has been everywhere, and he's well known in Europe because he's a great guy, great wrestler, and also a great teacher because he likes to do seminars and training. And Joe is a very, one of the very best guy that we have around here in Europe. So I would like to remember you that you can find on this channel, my channel, Belthazar channel, you can find the other episode that we had, which is episode with Leva Bates, the All Elite Wrestling Superstar, and also last week, like you said, we had Starbuck, which is another great European wrestler. So this week, Joe Legend, are you ready? Let's do it.
European Wrestling Podcast.
Welcome to the podcast, Joe. It's a great pleasure to have here to European Wrestling Podcast. And how you doing today?
I'm doing okay. Thank you very much for having me on.
So, Joe, we met the first time, I think probably around Europe somewhere back in 2000, maybe 7 or something like that. But I remember you when we met at the BSC Canadian tour with Rob Fuego, and that was back in 2008. Do you have any memory of that tour?
Oh, golly, there was a ton of stuff we did on that trip. That was the Cross Canada one. We started in Regina and finished up in Toronto, right?
Exactly. You joined half of the way. You were not there at the beginning of the tour. You joined us halfway with Murat. What was with you?
Yeah, we started the whole trip off in Regina and moved forward from there all the way through Manitoba and then into Ontario and all that. I remember that. It was a fun time.
Yeah, to me it's still, after all these years, it's still to me one of the best experience I ever had, because being on the tour with all those guys that I trained with back in the days, that was great. And also when you came on board, that was great as well, because you shared your experience, you taught us something, and it was great to have you there. And before going through your career, just one question about that tour. Do you remember? That was very embarrassing. Do you remember? I think it was the first day you came aboard, or maybe the second one. We had a show, and we ran out of the gas with the truck. I don't know if you remember that. I was on the truck with Rob and Tracy Brooke, and we ran out of the gas, and we were stuck in the middle of nowhere with the truck, and so we were very late to the show. I don't know if you remember that. And when we got to the arena, all the crowd was already there, but there wasn't a ring. Do you remember that?
Oh, vaguely, but I think was I in the truck with you guys, or was I?
No, you were not in the truck. You were
I was
in the car.
I was in the car with the guy, because we had the guys from we had Leahy and them from the Trailer Park Boys with us.
Exactly. I think you guys were.
So I was in the car with them.
You were in the car maybe with Rhino, because Rhino was at that show as well. So somebody picked him up at the airport. So you were in the car, I was in a truck, and we were stuck in the middle of nowhere with no gas. And I don't know if you remember that, because it was a long time ago, but do you have any memory of that?
I remember thinking, oh, gee whiz, this is not a good omen to start a trip off if we get to the first building and there's no ring. The biggest memory I have of the first night is one of the nicest things ever happened, honestly, is that I had a thing, because I had 4 belts. I remember Arda brought me over from Germany, and I had my South African belt, my Russian belt, my French belt, and my South African belt.
I said belts.
I said I'd bring the 4 belts over, and then what I wanted to do is I said, let's do a lottery every night, right? And just like for $1 or something, and we'll make sure 4 kids win, and the kids who win, they can carry the belts to the ring for me, and they're kind of part of the show. We'll take the money and we'll give it. I wanted to give it to the Make-A-Wish Foundation, but Arda said that they were involved with the Variety Club, so I was like, yeah, that's cool. Variety Club's fine by me. I think it was Variety Club. But either way, point is, I wanted the money to go to charity, and so we got to the to the building, and I'm like, okay, Arda, do you got the tickets for the raffle? And he's like, no, I don't have it. He goes, but honestly, there's this guy here. He's in a wheelchair. He's been in a pretty bad way. Do you mind if he just brings all four tonight?
I remember the guy. I remember the guy.
Yeah, but it was so sweet because I was standing there at the merch stand, and the guy rolled up and he had this woman pushing the chair. And he was in a bad way, like his legs, obviously, because he needed the chair. His legs weren't functioning well, but his arms were very like tensed up, like his upper body. He's struggling for use of his upper body. And so he came over and he goes, hi. I'm like, oh, you're my lovely and talented assistant tonight, right? Ha ha ha. And so we shoot the breeze for a minute, and he goes, listen, I just want to tell you something. He goes, when my condition started to worsen, I got diagnosed with it. I planned to kill myself. So I'm sitting there going, oh my God, like, I'm so glad you didn't do it, pal. And he said, he goes, I'll tell you a little story about what happened. He goes, I was sitting at my table and I was writing notes about why I was doing what I was doing to give to all my family and friends so they knew what was happening. I just didn't want to live like this. And he goes, the TV was on in the background and Monday Night Raw was on. And I just couldn't reach the converter while I was writing, so I just let it run. But it kept drawing my attention. So I was watching it and writing and watching it and writing, and I was ready to finish the notes and then that evening do the awful deed. And he goes, but the end of Raw, he goes, I remember seeing you on Raw. I was like, oh, gee, was like, that's kind of rare. I was only on a few of them. He said, yeah, he goes, but by the end of Raw, he goes, there was a thing that happened, an angle with probably Steve Austin or something like that at the time. Yeah. He goes, it was so compelling that I thought, you know what, I'm going to hold off on this for a week because I just want to see how this thing plays out on TV. I mean, there's no rush. He said, so I waited a week. He goes, and the next week I was sitting on my chair. So I had the converter in hand. I was just going to watch that. And then, at 11 o'clock when the show goes off, shut the TV off, and I was going to end it. But by the end of that show, it was really interesting. So I thought I'll hold off another week. So I held off another week. Then I was at the end of that show. I thought, well, I'm just going to wait till the pay-per-view. I do I don't need a lot of money, so I'll just spend the money on the pay-per-view, and then that's that. So I watched the pay-per-view. But then the end of the pay-per-view, I want to see the fallout on Raw. So I waited till the next night. He goes, and 1 week became 2, became 3, became a month, became 2 months. Because then I got online. I got into these online communities of wrestling fans and chit-chatting and discussing those. And that's where I met. And he struggled to gesture, but he pointed to the woman who's pushing his chair because that's where I met my wife.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God. And I do get emotional every time I tell the story, but justifiably so. And he goes, and so he reaches up with his hand, the condition it was in. He goes, I just want to say thank you for saving my life.
Wow, that's a hell of a story, man.
Yeah,
I never heard that.
I shook his hand and I had tears in my eyes. I'm like, here, have a shirt, have a poster, have a kidney. I don't care, right? I was so fucking broken up over it. But it gave me a different perspective because there's plenty of reason to say this is kind of a silly industry and a silly job and kind of a silly way to make a living, and those are all valid statements. But sometimes you don't realize the effect that maybe your one silly thing you're doing as a lark might be having on somebody. I mean, this is one guy I happened to meet who, by watching wrestling, decided to not make a terrible, terrible choice. Now, how many people around the world who I haven't met have done the same thing where they were just making bad choices, and wrestling, of all the silly things in the world, turned the tide for them. So it gave me a new respect about the impact that, our little contribution to the world might be able to make.
That's awesome. And was he the same guy? Because I remember he also was a guy on a wheelchair, and he may be the same guy that at the end of one of the show that we were doing over there, he came up to us, to everybody, not just to me or just in front of all the crew, all the guys, and he said thank you guys for everything you're doing. You put your body on the line every night for entertainment. He was making
that was the guy.
He was that guy. Okay, because I remember
it was me and Rhino in that match. Rhino put me over in that match. He was like my manager, that guy. And Rhino put me over in that match. Then at the end of the show, we all because he was sitting there with my belts all over him, watching the match.
So it was the same guy.
Wanted to make sure. Yeah, he wanted to make a statement to thank everybody because like it's nice of him to say he saw me on Raw. Thank you for saving my life. Like clearly, I was not the only factor because I was a pretty shit gimmick and I was only on the show for like a minute or two. Clearly, Austin and Rock and Taker and all those guys had far more of an impact to keep this guy watching. But I think he just had an overall sense of gratitude to the wrestling industry, whether they're the guys filling the arenas and the stadiums for WWE, or even the indie guys who might one day do the arenas, or might just stay in the little halls that we were doing for Arda. And I think he just had an appreciation for all that we were doing, regardless of the levels.
Exactly. That's what I remember.
Sweet guy. Yeah.
That's what I remember most about his speech. It was like he was talking as like if he was talking to some superstars or whatever. But he said like, it doesn't matter if you're on TV or if you're just, doing some indie show. He showed a lot of respect, and his words were so heavy that I remember were guys that were tears in their eyes, like Tracy, she was crying all along, and a lot of guys were, because he really touched all of us. And I always have this guy in my memory, and that was a great moment. And it's crazy how that show ended up, considering how he started that show, because like you said, he started out in the worst possible way, because not only we were absolutely late, but the guy who was in charge of the arena, he let the people in, which is even more crazy. I mean, you had like maybe 300 to 400 people sitting there watching each other, and then there is no ring in the middle. So I don't know what they were thinking.
Oh, they must have been thinking, what the hell have I spent my money on at first? But fortunately, it was a good crew of guys who made the wait worth their while. I think we started about 20 minutes, a half hour late, all told. Yeah, because they wanted to get the ring up and everything else. But for the fact that the fans were sitting in there in an arena with all the chairs but no ring, I imagine half of them are going, well, where do I go to get my money back? And then when they're seeing the ring, in a way, it's kind of good that they see the ring get set up, because so many people think, it's a trampoline and it's big pads and everything. And then when they see the big iron structure go up and then the big heavy boards and stuff like that, by the time the ring's set up, they're going, oh my God, these guys are going to be falling on that. And I think it gives them a new appreciation of, what we endure.
But as far as I remember, we put the people out to set up the ring, because we don't really have a
bunch of people being in there, but maybe they were just family and friends or arena.
Yeah, probably.
I remember a bunch of people in there.
Because the problem is because we were on tour, we don't have, like, the crew is Robbie himself. Everybody else is just the wrestler themselves. So some guys had a mask. Some guys, you can't recognize them. But most of the guys you can clearly see are the same guy. So it's not good for business to have a guy, setting. It's like going to see a show and then you see, I don't know, Stone Cold setting up the ring, and then you're gonna see it in the ring.
Well, it's like going to Disney World and seeing the guy in the Mickey Mouse suit with the head off having a cigarette.
Yeah, exactly.
So it ruins the illusion. Yeah, I get you.
So we had to put the people out and then set up the ring as fast as possible. And then we had like maybe 10 minutes to talk the match, which, I mean, when you have experience, like today I can go out there and have a match without even talk about it. But back then, I was in the very beginning of my career, and I was terrified. Like, how the hell are we going to put a match together in 10 minutes? And
I've had even stronger. Like, I know that I was out in the East Coast, and we ended up at the arena late. I was the champ, so obviously I was going up last. And they had our locker rooms at opposite ends of the arena, the baby faces and heels.
Old school.
So I couldn't talk to the guy I was working with. So the referee came over. My friend Frank Parker, bless him, he's passed on now. But Frank Parker came in and he goes, okay, well, this is your match. And I'm like, all right, well, I kind of know what this kid does. Here are the things I want to do. I'll tell him when to do them. Pass it along. So I relayed the information through Frank to the other locker room. And then I still had to do, I think, 30, 35 minutes with the guy.
Okay.
And I didn't see him until we got in the ring. And one even stronger than that is in South Africa in 1995. We would only work like once a week. But on Monday, they would put the advertising in the newspaper of who's working who, come this Friday. And they said it was me and I think Tornado 2, which is a local South African guy named Steve. He's awesome. And then on Friday, the newspaper says it's me and Chi Cruz. And Chichi's my buddy and everything. We'd only worked like, I think, once against each other in Winnipeg. But, I mean, we didn't know what was going on. Now, back then in South Africa, things worked like the old European style, the old German style, where it was in rounds and it was 2 out of 3 falls. And so I'm at the arena. I'm like, I don't know who I'm working. Like the newspaper, one newspaper says Tornado, the other one says Cheech. What the hell's going on? So the promoter's name is Ish Maharaj, Indian fella, obviously. And I'm standing there, and Ish walks in. I'm like, Ish, who am I wrestling? He goes, I don't know what the newspaper say. I'm like, well, it said you should know. You run this thing, but it said Tornado was one and Cheech the other, and I don't know who I'm working. He goes, oh, we'll figure it out. I'm like, yeah, I got to have like, a standard match was 5 rounds. I said, I got to figure out 5 rounds, and I got to think of 3 finishes because 2 or 3 falls. Can you give me some heads up, please? And he's like, yeah, we'll figure it out. Like, he's getting impatient with me. And I'm like, look, I don't mean to be a dick, but do you hear the music playing? I'm supposed to be walking to the ring right now. That's my entrance music, and I'm sitting here trying to argue with you just to find out what I'm doing. He goes, just go to the ring and you'll figure it out. And I'm like, oh my God. So I just walked out to the ring, and it was a big tennis stadium. And so I'm standing there in the middle of the ring just because I was a heel. I got to just go out there and be a dick and draw some heat. And I stood there and waited and waited and waited until finally they sent out Chi Cruz. And while the ref was giving us our pat down and our instructions, I'm like, Cheech, what does he want? And he goes, you take 1 in the 3rd, I take 1 in the 4th, and then we go Broadway in the 5th. I was like, all right. And ding, 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 we were double heel, and we went out there, and I had one of the best matches of my life, just calling it on the fly. It was great. But it was also a plus because Chi Cruz is an incredible talent. And we have a similar mindset on how to structure a match, so it wasn't hard to convince him to do stuff. Neither one of us was like, that doesn't make any sense while we're doing stuff and trying to counterman the other. We just really got into this flow. And in turn, I've had some of the best matches of my life with Cheech. But like that was like, I'm standing in the ring. I don't even know who my opponent is, and I got to come up with 3 finishes. So learning how to do that in the modern day, I don't know if you can. It's a lost art because everything's based towards TV. Very little of what like WWE does. If they're going to do something of note, it has to be on camera. So town show business is down because really nothing monumental is going to happen on a town show. They're going to wait till it's on camera. So you got to get your camera time right. But when you show up, you've got 4 minutes, and they might even cut it short.
Yeah,
you got to get in there, shine up some moves, and get the hell out in the hopes of drawing some attention to yourself, because they don't give you much chance to get anything else over.
Yeah,
but you can't tell a compelling story in 4 minutes.
Yeah, that's what I always said. I always say to my guys, like, if you really the guy that I train, if you wanna learn wrestling, you can't watch just SmackDown or Raw, because what they do is TV. Like WWE is not pro wrestling. WWE is WWE. They do their things. They do their things, and it's a TV product. So it's not what you're looking for. What you're looking for is how to work with the crowd. So you need to go to see house show if you want to watch WWE, or maybe pay-per-view. They have more time, but it's a different thing. So you can't just watch SmackDown.
It's also a struggle too, because like on TV they tell you don't work the crowd, work the camera.
Yeah, exactly. Because
in turn that you don't engage the crowd. Like you see a guy like Ted DiBiase Jr., right? Like I teamed with him a bunch of times in Japan in Noah. He's a handsome kid. He had a great physique. He had the DiBiase name. He showed up with the $1 million belt on television with that super unbelievably hot Maurice chick. They gave him every opportunity to succeed. But when he walked through the curtain, they told him, don't acknowledge the crowd, acknowledge the camera. So in turn, when he walked out, he didn't acknowledge the crowd, so the crowd kind of didn't acknowledge him, even though he's talented. He's quite good. But you get a guy like The Rock or Austin who comes out. I mean, The Rock is all about working the crowd. He almost forgets there's another wrestler because he's too busy working the crowd. But in turn, the guys who work the crowd are the ones who get the most over and get the most main event. So the office is doing the talent a disservice. I understand not overworking the crowd. You don't want to turn it into pantomime. And you don't want to spend so much time working the crowd in a 4-minute match that you forget that you've got a match to get across. So they've got to learn to balance the crowd work with the ring work. And I don't think they give the talent enough chance to do that, which is why you can't really name me personally from what I've watched. You can't name me anybody who's a monster star in the business of the like of a Steve Austin or a Rock or a Hogan who's turning the business on his ear. It's just a bunch of interchangeable people because they're told not really to work the crowd so much as to, work each other and acknowledge the camera.
And what do you think about the performance center? Because I mean, I think the facility is great because they have all the opportunity there, but it's not like, do they miss something when they get to the big stage? Because I mean, they never been around like work in the crowd and really start from the ground, or maybe I don't know.
No, well, here's the thing. Any of the guys that have gone through the performance center and have gone on to the big stage and actually gotten over without the machine pounding the audience into believing in them, like a guy like Roman Reigns. We believe that Roman Reigns is a top guy because WWE has pushed him in such a fashion. So he's an exception. But as far as people just showing up, getting over on their own merit, and then because they're getting over, they kind of get a push. And even then they're getting over, but they're not getting holy shit over. They're just getting over. But all the guys who they push in that regard are kind of guys who were already over elsewhere. Like you got your Kevin Owens and your Seth Rollins and your Sami Zayn and stuff. These guys were all Ring of Honor guys.
Yeah.
And then who's the guy? The guy who looks like me with mono. The guy who's the NXT champ, Bebe or whatever. I can't remember his name.
I don't know. Don't ask me about NXT because
okay, well, he's the NXT champ. Well, they just got a show. They're going to be on the USA Network apparently, going against the AEW show in the same time slot.
Okay.
But either way, but he was a big deal with Ring of Honor as well, and that's because these Ring of Honor guys are at least they're given the opportunity to work with the crowd because you rarely see a 3 or 4 minute Ring of Honor match. All these guys put in 20, 25 minutes. And there's only so many flips and flops and big moves you can do to engage the crowd. You have to work with the crowd as well because there's only so many headlocks they can see, only so many flips they can see, only so many dives they can see, where it doesn't all just become commonplace. With the Performance Center, I think the Performance Center is a good idea to ground floor you, to teach you, the fundamentals, ring positioning, working hard cam as much as working the other cameras, timing, crap like that to a degree. But I don't like the idea that guys go on the Performance Center and then you kind of throw them on TV because they're all getting trained by the same 3, 4, or 5 people. So they're all acting like the same 3, 4, or 5 people. So once you get them on TV, they don't stand out as anybody else but another version of the same 3, 4, or 5 people.
Well, but I think they change the trainers, no? Do they change the trainers time to time?
Well, I think they're bringing guest trainers, but they have a core group of trainers that these guys have to impress to move up.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I like the idea personally. If I was running it, and like we got to qualify this, I'm a control freak. Okay, so I would change things a lot of times just because I want to put my stink on it, and maybe it's the wrong move, but at least it's my move. It's a failing on my part. Maybe sometimes it's a benefit, sometimes a failing. But I like the idea of, okay, we've trained you. We think you're ready to go out into the world and work. Now, guys, we're going to pay you, say, $700, $1,000 a week. Go get over. And WWE has a system there where they start making calls to like Brian Dixon in England. And they say, okay, Brian, we got these WWE guys, shit. It's good. I am. We got these WWE guys. We want to get them some work. Can you put them on your camp shows for the summer? You don't have to pay them, but they got to get on your crew. They've got to do all the stuff that indie guys do. They got to set up the ring, and they've got to go out there and find a way to get over with the crowd. And then we're going to send scouts out periodically to watch your shows and see how these guys are coming along. And you get to advertise, of course, that these guys are WWE superstars in the making type thing. And then guys go to England for a couple of months and do the summer circuit for Dixon or for Sanjay for LDN. And then maybe they go down to Mexico and do a loop down there, or maybe they go to Japan and go to the dojo there and work with Noah or one of these other companies. But the idea is that they get to go someplace and find a way to get themselves over to the point where WWE goes, this guy's over with this, now let's just piggyback it. Because when I watched WWE over the years, back from when it was WWF on, when I look at all the guys who got over, I only see one guy that Vince made from the absolute ground floor that was a monster star, right? Like Hogan was a big deal in the AWA, Japan, and Rocky III before he got there. Savage was monstrous in the South and then kind of moved on. all these guys like Ultimate Warrior got himself over in Mid-South and in Texas and stuff like that. And then, but he already had the gimmick when he showed up. He understood his own gimmick. He knew how to convey that gimmick. Steve Austin was brought in as the ringmaster, but then when he came up with Stone Cold, then they could get behind him. Vince is great at taking something that's over and getting behind it and making it monster over.
Yeah.
He had Rocky Maivia, blue chip third generation superstar that nobody gave a shit about. When Rock decided to take that and make The Rock, it was huge, and then Vince got behind it and made it, monumental.
But you
The only guy that Vince, in my opinion, has ever made from the ground floor and was a monumental star is Undertaker. He showed up as Undertaker, and Vince, and it's not a hard gimmick to push. Don't sell, don't lose, go. That's kind of it. But Vince definitely ground floored that. But I find Vince is more successful at taking something that is over and getting behind it than he is of creating a ground floor gimmick. So I think the best thing to do is send guys out, let them get themselves over, and then, hey, I like that. This is what we could do to make it bigger. And then Vince can get behind all these guys. And they'll be more comfortable moving forward because they're not trying to get over the agent's idea. They're trying to get over their own idea, and they'll have more invested in it. That's my opinion.
Well, but what I'm more concerned about is that how we can have another Stone Cold, another The Rock, when guys nowadays are so controlled. Like,
yeah.
I don't know how much freedom they have to really go over by themselves.
I agree.
I really don't know because you really don't know exactly what's going on behind the curtain because, I have connection there, but, I don't know exactly how it works there. But for what I've heard from other podcasts, other interviews, and people that I've talked with, it seems like they have a lot of control. Like
completely.
There's no much space to really do your things. And I think the greatest example is maybe Cesaro, because I'm sure that if you let him go, he's going over in 6 months because Claudio
is awesome. Cesaro is excellent.
Claudio is a hell of a guy, and he has a great sense of humor. I think he can go over like big time with a U.S. crowd. But for whatever reason,
here's the problem with Cesaro, and I love the guy, is he's not the strongest promo in the world, right? I think everybody can see the fact that he's a hell of a talent, but it's hard to get him over on the mic, which is and putting him with Heyman for 5 minutes and pulling Heyman off made it look like he wasn't worthwhile, and he is. But that was more to get Heyman on TV to talk about Brock Lesnar than it was ever to get Cesaro over. But whatever. The point being is that you have a developmental territory. And back, I think when he was there, it was still FCW. But regardless, the point is they had a developmental territory. Why didn't you develop his promo skills? Like, to me, if you say, well, this guy hasn't developed this, well, then that's down to the company not helping him develop it. That's not down to him. You threw him on TV without a skill that he desperately needed to get as over as you want to make money with him from. And you didn't develop it. So that's down to the company screwing that up. That's not really his fault. He's sitting there twisting in the wind because who of their trainers was ever a great promo? Like Steve Corino's a really good promo. But like Norman Smiley was never a great promo. They had Rick Steamboat was doing it for a while. I love Steamboat as a talent. Holy crap, was he good? But he was never a set the world on fire promo. None of their guys were set the world on fire promos, so it's hard to get them to give you bullet points on how best to sell your promo. So they should have. The simplest thing. There's like in Toronto, there's a thing called Yuck Yucks. It's a comedy club. It's across Canada, really. But every Monday night they have amateur night. And what happens is in the afternoon, you go in and you get bullet points on comedy. And then if you want, you can perform on amateur nights, like an open mic night.
Okay.
But ultimately, if I was to go there in the afternoon, I would learn the benefits of set 'em up, punchline, set 'em up, punchline, which ultimately is the similar format to a promo. I set you up, I sell you on the product. Set you up, sell you on the angle. It's not a complicated formula, but you're going to have comedians there, guys who basically have to get themselves over on the mic. I mean, what else does a comedian do but get himself over on the mic? So in turn, send Cesaro to Yuck Yucks on Monday afternoons and let him learn to structure what he wants to say in the most economical, economy of words, I guess you'd call it, the most economical way with his words, and let him get it across. You could have guys help him with, okay, you need a catchphrase because all the greats have a catchphrase that we can sell a T-shirt with. But I think that's where they dropped the ball with Cesaro. But I think the company took one of the bad things from ECW, where the crowd would chant ECW more than they would chant the name of the town, right? Which is kind of good because they'll always sell tickets because of the brand. But at the same time, wrestling companies have always risen off the back of huge stars. Steve Austin blew WWE through the roof, and Rock continued it. Hulk Hogan blew the company through the roof. Savage was able to do well with it, and Warrior, but ultimately Hogan was the be-all, end-all for the time he was there. They're so busy thinking of WWE that they're not thinking about blowing the talent up. And a prime example of that was Seth Rollins was the champ a while back, a couple of years ago, and he got hurt and they had to pull the belt off him. And it was a couple of months before Mania, and somebody asked one of the top, if it wasn't Vince, it was one of the top guys. They said, "Hey, shoot, like Rollins is your boy, and he's too injured and he won't be able to make WrestleMania. Does this screw your WrestleMania plans?" And their reaction immediately was, "No, we have our top 5 matches. He wasn't in any of them, so we're okay." He's your champ. Why wasn't he figured into the top 5 matches? Because you've made all the guys interchangeable. And some guys are and some guys aren't. You couldn't be interchangeable with Austin. Austin was Austin. He was going to draw. You can't interchange Austin with Barry Horowitz. Barry Horowitz was better than he was given the opportunity to show, but he wasn't going to tear the world apart like Steve Austin was. And there are certain guys who are top guys: Hogan, Austin, Rock, guys like that. You can't replace them, but they've put a structure in place that everybody's kind of replaceable. We can put this guy in the top place for a while. Oh, okay, now we're going to change him for that guy. Whereas, like, say, during the Attitude Era, you had Austin, Rock, Taker, Angle, and Kane and Jericho kind of both floated in and out. But those were kind of in your top 6. Those were your guys that you could always count on. But there's nothing wrong with having a top tier. But now they don't have a top tier. They just have a list of wrestlers. And, Dolph Ziggler goes out there and tears the house down. But then next month, he's losing to Goldberg in 3 seconds, like 4 times on the same pay-per-view.
But, I think what I've learned through the years is that, WWE is, has been around for a very long time. I think it's kind of hard for them for coming up with something new every week. So, I've learned not to, like, back in the days.
If they want our money, they've got to do it. They've got a responsibility to do it. And maybe they got to hire better writers, or maybe their writers just burnt out and they have to shift new writers in and out. Maybe that's the case.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that I've learned, but like back in the days when I I don't know, 15 years ago, when I was younger, I was always criticize WWE, and but at the end of the day, it's I think they don't do it on purpose. I mean, they don't make mistake on purpose, so they probably trying to do the best they could. And for me, outside is always easy to criticize, but at the end of the day, I don't know. I think they try. Sometimes you have to try, and then maybe sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. There's a couple of things
everything they've done, everything they did that made themselves monstrously successful in years past, they've kind of pulled back in favor of a new format. And their new format isn't as strong as their other format. When I was there, and I wasn't it's not like I was the big draw, but when I was there, we were doing arenas, 16,000, 17,000 every week sellouts. And if things went down to 13,000, Vince was pulling his hair out and threatening to fire everybody. Now they do a town show of like 4,000, and they're like, "Wow, 4,000, yes!" Like, that's a big change. They are not drawing what they used to draw. And I hope AEW kind of puts a shoe up the ass of them to put out a better product. But right now, I find I don't really watch the product. To be fair, what I have seen, I wouldn't compel me to watch a game. Now, maybe it's just because I've watched too much of it and I'm involved in it, and I'm looking at it from a different perspective. But the people I know who are watching it and who watch it every week and kind of tell me about it, nobody is championing it the way they used to champion it years ago when you actually had stars, when the talent were the stars and the company was the machine running the stars. Now they're kind of pushing the machine on top, and the stars are just a bunch of interchangeable people because the company matters. The company doesn't matter to the fans; the stars do. And I think I would never buy a T-shirt if I had two T-shirts available, and one said WWE Corporation and Austin 316. I guarantee Austin 316 is going to outsell that other one unless the Austin 316s are sold out.
Yeah, the only way the company goes more over, like you said, is but because ECW always was the the underdog.
Yeah.
So the idea was we are the underdog, we are the company that nobody wants around, nobody wants to see it. So we're going to war together.
Yeah.
And
that was their little gang. That was
exactly.
that was their punk rock underground music. That was whereas WWE was pop music selling at stadiums. And that's okay. That worked for something small for ECW. But how well did it work if they went out of business?
Yeah. Well, well. So Joe, so we we were talking about a little bit of everything, but just I want to have a couple of maybe cover up a little bit of your career so far. I know it's a long career, but just a couple of key points. Like, well, obviously you were born in Canada in Toronto, and like my podcast is like I said is about European wrestlers or international wrestlers and their experience in Europe, and you're a little bit of both. Like Starbuck, you certainly know he was my last guest last week, and so you're a little bit of both, and you have been around Europe so long that you became a European wrestler yourself, pretty much.
Yeah.
So just I was growing up in Canada, and maybe I was training there, becoming a wrestler there, and then we can cover about your moving to Europe.
Well, like you say, I grew up in Toronto. It was very regulated. Wrestling was. It was really hard when I was starting out because nobody would run shows because the athletic commission was really sewn up by WWE to run. If I remember correctly, it's a long time ago, but if you did a township of under 100,000 people, it would still cost you in the range of $12,000 to run a show. It was something like that because there was all kinds of fees and things you had to pay the athletic commission, a bond with the commission, then insurances and everything else. So nobody would run legally because you'd never make your money back. And then if it was over 100,000 people in the city, it was some monstrous amount of money on top of that. And obviously, if you're doing the smaller towns, you're just going to draw less people because there's just not as many people to come to the show. So it was a struggle to try and find work because nobody's going to shop you in from really far away if you have no foundation to build from. What I got the blessing is that I was training in Toronto with Ron Hutchison and Sweet Daddy Ziggy, and Ron and Ziggy got us involved in a couple of local shows, which got me one show in Hamilton, which is, to people listening, Hamilton's about 45 minutes from Toronto. So it wasn't too far of a journey. So Keith and I worked each other a couple times. Canada Day, free show at the thing there. There was the Chin Picnic. There was the first show ever was for Tiger Jeet Singh, and there was like 10,000 Indian people there because it was a big Indian festival. And that kind of got us noticed a little bit because, I mean, there was a lot of people. But Tiger Jeet Singh asked if I would help train his son, Tiger Jeet Singh Jr., Tiger Ali Singh in WWE. He asked if I could teach him some stuff, if I wouldn't mind coming in during the week. I said, yeah, I was just looking for more ring time. So I put in 2 weeks of 5 days a week with Mick, and then on the weekends, I would train with the rest of the team. And after 2 weeks, Tiger came in and asked, okay, what can he do? So we showed him. And he goes, okay, great, that's enough. And I'm like, oh, you're not happy? He goes, no, I'm perfectly happy. We're going to Japan. There's a FMW tag team tournament, and it's going to be Tiger Jeet Singh and Tiger Jeet Singh Jr. at the time. I'm like, you sure? Because, like, he's only really been training hard for 2 weeks. And I mean, I know I'm not ready, and I'm the guy who's showing him stuff. So are you sure he's ready? Because I don't want him showing up there and doing poorly, and then it falls on my head. And Tiger goes, no, I love what you've done with him, and I'm there to guide him. And he, it's FMW. He's got the Tiger Jeet Singh name, and he can swing a chair. We're going to be fine. I'm like, okay, fine. So they went, and it worked. Junior got over huge with Tiger. And about a month later, Siki pulled me in the office and said, have you got a passport? I'm like, no. He goes, get one. I'm like, because why? He goes, because you're going to Japan. I was like, hey? And Tiger got me booked in Japan for FMW. He didn't promise me anything. He didn't, at the head of time, like I didn't say, okay, well, if I teach Mick this, you've got to do that. I was just happy to be in the ring extra during the week. So it was nothing but absolute generosity and kindness on Tiger's part that he got me booked. And I was still too green to go. If you talk to Sabu, he'll let you know. But I learned a ton on that trip, and that kicked open doors because this is really before the internet. So this is 1992 or 93. I think it's 92. I can't remember. But when I got back to Canada, my name was in all the sheets as this guy from Toronto who'd gone over to Japan. So all of a sudden, guys in Cleveland and Detroit and stuff were saying, hey, this guy went to Japan. He's not that far away. You want to come work for us? And ECW was just starting to get on the build, and ECW and FMW had similar philosophies. So they thought, oh, okay, well, Joe knows how to swing a chair and barbed wire and all that. So that kicked open doors. And then in turn, I was able to kick open doors for a lot of other guys. And then I started going to Winnipeg, and I helped Edge and Christian and those guys get booking Swinger. And then when I started going to Detroit, I met Rhino. So then I brought Rhino to Winnipeg, and then that kind of blew open. I went back to Japan. Tiger got me booked for another company called NOW over there. And I was doing okay with most of that. And then Rhino got booked over in Germany and got over huge. And then I just come back from a month-long tour of Eastern Canada. I was in the door like 2 hours maybe. And then Rhino calls up and says, hey, man, you want to go to Germany? I'm like, okay, when? He goes, next week. I was like, okay, for how long? He goes, 6 weeks. I go, really? How often do we work? He goes, 7 days a week usually. I'm like, really? He goes, yeah, here's, let me call Peter Williams. He goes, remember Duke the Dumpster Drozy? He was known as Marshall Duke. He had like a cowboy gimmick over here. He was really like a big deal here. People really liked him, but he had some kind of a legal issue and he couldn't leave Florida until he resolved it. So they had this opening and they asked Rhino if he knew anybody. So Rhino got me booked over in Germany for Otto Wanz. And then that's what kicked open my, my European thing. That got me Europe, which got me, it got me Germany, which got me Austria. And then when I went back to Canada, I did Eastern Canada. Then I got to WWE. Then when I was WWE, my European German stuff got me into England. And now I've done 131 tours of the UK so far. And that's all kind of all interlinked, but that's how I wound up filtering my way into Europe. And then I met my missus, so I moved here. And now I live in Germany.
And back to the days, it's like you said, you've been, when you got the call from WWE, how was for you, like, because, it was something that you expected, or it was, how did it happen to you to end up being in WWE?
Well, Edge had already signed on, and so had Christian. And so they were kind of putting the word in for me. And they put me over to Jim Cornette. They brought me down to Connecticut to their training center, and I'd done a camp for them there. Well, actually, I should qualify that. First, I had a tryout with WWE. Actually, Christian made the efforts. They got me a tryout at Skydome, 44,000 people. So it was a bit of pressure. I was working with a buddy of mine, and things got messed up in the match, and I was like, oh, no, this is it. I got one screw up, and now I'm done. This sucks. Anybody got WCW's number? And Cornette pulled me aside and said, look, we saw what happened. There was a mistake. We know, A, it wasn't your fault, and B, you went out of your way to correct it. You didn't get flustered. We love that. So I want to bring you in for a camp. So I'm like, okay. So a screw up actually helped me there. So he liked me, and then Cornette was like all about, I want to get you booked. I want to get you booked. And actually, when I got to Germany, Cornette called my house. I called home to talk to my folks. And my mom's like, yeah, some really hyper guy called here. His name's Jim something. He's so excitable. I said, yeah, Jim who? And so she looked at us, the cornet. I go, holy crap, Jim called? She goes, yeah, he says you got to give him a call. Here's his number. So I called him. I remember having a huge pile of change in my hands because I didn't want it was payphone time, right? So I just pouring coins in his phone. And Cornet, apparently he has a reputation of not picking up, but he picked up when he heard my voice, which I was really thankful for. And he's like, yeah, I want to get you this tryout. I think we got something for you. I'm like, well, I'm in Germany, but I'll come home if you need. And he's like, you're in Germany? No, stay there. This is great bargaining chip. You're busy. Wrestling's like a bitchy girlfriend. They only want you when somebody else does. This is going to be great for you. It's like, all right. So I stayed in Germany, and I don't want to say I was expectant of a job with WWE, but it was a huge boost to my confidence. And then I went through that, and then I went through the summer. After I finished that, I finished up Germany toward the end of December. And I went back to Toronto. I was doing bits and bobs in Detroit and stuff like that. But then the summer started for Rene Dupree's dad, Emil, the end of May of '99. So I went out there, and Emil gave me a great spot and put the belt on me, and I had a great run at the top of the card, and I was having the best summer of my life, but best match of my life with Chichi Cruz and Kurgan and all this. I was doing a great job. And out of the blue, Christian called me. We were staying at Frank Parker's house, the referee who passed. And Christian called me up there. He goes, Joe, Terry Taylor's going to call you. I'm like, okay. And Terry, I also got along with him at those training centers. He said, Terry says they got they're restarting the Freebirds, and they want you to be the Terry Gordy of it. I was like, what? He goes, yeah. I said, but I'm not from the South, and I don't drink. Like, those are two key elements of a Freebird. What the hell? He's like, look, do you want the job or not? I'm like, yeah, absolutely, I want the job. I seem like the wrong candidate for it, but all right. He goes, well, just be ready. Terry's going to call you in like the next hour. So Terry called and said, yeah, we want to bring you in. When's the nearest time we can bring you in? We'd like to bring you in on September 7th. We like for an actual look-see on the 7th. When before then can we fly you in? And I said, well, actually, I got my last gig here on the 5th. So if you fly me into Connecticut on the 6th, that's ideal. And so they flew me in. I did a workout match at the camp. Michael Hayes had to see it because he was going to manage us. And so they put me and Reckless Youth in to do a match together. He was going to be a Freebird as well. And then there was a floating idea of like 4 or 5 different guys who was going to be the third guy. And so Reckless and I did our match, and apparently Michael Hayes loved it. And then Terry Taylor pulled us aside and gave us our deal. And that's how I got in, is I was going to be a Freebird. And then between the time they signed me and the time my visa came through, Hayes had decided he didn't want to be on camera. He had a sour taste in his mouth because he managed the Hardys for like 15 minutes. And then they decided that wasn't the right fit because, Mike isn't really like, the Hardys were kind of doing this new wave at the time, almost a goth thing. They were half vampire looking things, right? Yeah. That really isn't Michael Hayes' style. So he just wanted to be an agent and help the tag division. So then I was signed to be something, but then that something didn't exist anymore. So they flew me to Connecticut, and I met with Vince and Bruce Pritchard and Linda, who I can't say enough nice things about. Linda is such a sweet, sweet lady. And we had our meeting there, and Vince, I guess he watched some videos before I came in the office because there was 3 of us, and it took forever for each guy to get pulled in. And he compared me. He says, you get it. You get the idea of how this job works. He goes, and I compare you to, you're like a halfway point between Ted DiBiase and Mick Foley. And I was like, wow, that's really complimentary. Holy shit. So I was excited going in, and then by the time I got to TV, they gave me the worst gimmick in wrestling history. so it all went to hell from there. But that was the journey into the company.
Who came out with Just Joe? Who was the idea? Was any specific? Well, beside Vince, that he usually take all of the decisions, but was anybody else that suggests that?
Well, when I was brought in to that meeting, I told, like, they said, okay, well, how do you see yourself being presented? And I said, well, truthfully, I'm like, cult leaders scare me because it's amazing how you can say to somebody, hey, take this gun and go kill that guy. And they'd be like, no. And I'll give you $20, kill that guy. They go, no. But under the right conditions, you say, hey, if you don't kill that guy, God will hate you. And you'll give me $20 for for the privilege of killing that guy. I said, they're like, cult leaders are so manipulative. And there was some kind of, it was close to an anniversary of the David Koresh thing in Waco. So I thought, this is kind of an idea. I said, I just want to come in and obviously be a manipulative scumbag as a heel. And Vince's like, oh, we don't like that idea because we don't like to touch religion. And all I'm thinking of is Brother Love, Reverend Devon,
man,
like Shawn, like you wrestled Shawn Michaels and God in a tag team match. Come on, right? I don't say it because I want the job, right? But I'm kind of leaving it alone there. And so he goes, well, what else do you got? And I said, well, another idea I had is that I cut my hair really short, suit and tie, because this was right at the tail end of the grunge era. And I was like, everybody here has got like, poorly bleached blonde hair and nose rings and tattoos and, scruffy looking clothes. And I said, I want to tell, American youth to straighten up and dress right, pull your pants up. And, I want to have a group called the Moral Majority where we're trying to, straighten America up because, the kids are acting like scumbags. And he's like, I don't see a lot of money in that, even though the right to censor wound up coming around, right?
Yeah, but they did something like that.
Exactly, the right to censor.
Yeah.
So
with the girl, what's the name? I don't remember.
And the cult thing they did with Mordecai, the cult leader thing. So okay. I was told like a while later by Al Snow, he goes, yeah, like the last thing, he goes, whenever you're introducing an idea to them, you got to introduce two ideas first that they can use on somebody else before you give one for yourself, because they will take the ones you give for yourself and use them on somebody else. And you're left sitting there with this great idea that somebody else is making money off of. Like, okay. But so I came back to the cult leader thing because I really felt there was money in that. And he goes, I just don't like the idea of, the religious thing. I said, yeah, but I'm not saying I'm God. I'm just kind of saying I'm the messenger. But really, I'm self-serving. And he goes, oh, and he like strokes his chin in the most like Mr. McMahon kind of way. And he stares off into the ceiling. He's like, don't blame me. I'm just the messenger. He's like, Bruce, have corporate or whatever look under licensing and see if the messenger is, if that's licensed or whatever, trademark. And so we started talking about doing that, where basically I'd be a guy backstage who had insider knowledge of everybody. And I had the idea, I said, like, I should be busting into the medical reports where like I'm sitting backstage and you got Crash Holly sitting there almost in tears going, oh, I got to wrestle Taz and Taz is going to kill me. And I'm like, yeah, well, he doesn't have to if you have the right information. Like, what? Well, Taz tore his bicep off a couple of years ago. You go after his arm, you could take him. And I'd show him like an x-ray of Taz's arm or something like that. And then somehow the guy goes out and beats Taz. So eventually I'm like the guy with the insider information. And that ultimately would have led to some kind of a deal where I would be involved with the acolytes. That was the initial idea. But then by the time my visa came through, this guy, Jamie, who he looked like Tom Green. He was a complete moron. But they gave him my gimmick and let him run with it. And then he came up with the most terrible ideas you could imagine. And every time he's like, well, what do you got? And I'd have something that I thought was pretty good. And everybody else in the room thought was pretty good. And he'd be like, no, we're not doing that. And we'd end up having to do his thing, which was only worthless. And every time I tried to, look, I would ask him, I was like, okay, well, let me ask you, is my character, am I telling the truth or am I lying? He goes, oh, come on, what difference does that make? I go, it makes a huge difference. If I'm telling the truth, then I'm actually a babyface who's really trying to help people. And if I'm lying, why am I lying? There has to be a goal line. Nobody just runs up and lies about stuff for the sake of lying. Like, I would have to have a goal line, and I have to have some of the stuff met. My goal has to be reached to a certain degree to me to have a method to my madness, to have value. If I just go out there and lie and get killed, there's no value to this character. I'll be unemployed in 6 months. Don't you worry, I got it covered. This is my job. And sure enough, he didn't have a clue of what to do. They used me to get over the Triple H Kurt Angle bit with Stephanie, where I'm like, Kurt, Hunter's kicking the shit out of Stephanie. And then I go to Hunter, hey, Hunter, Kurt's trying to score with Stephanie. And I got their angle started. But then once their angle started, they had to pull me off it, or eventually all the heat switches to me, and they didn't. That wasn't what the angle was meant to be between those two. So I understand pulling me off of it, but then they had no plans for me after that. and they just wasted my time.
Yeah, because I think, the idea behind it wasn't, it could work because it's, instead using a random guy, you have a character that is making a connection between, like you said, like Kurt Angle or Triple H or Stone Cold or whoever was there. So
Right.
hey, this guy's is talking behind your back, or this guy's in doing this. So you're kind of, like a jolly, like a guy that,
A backstage stooge.
it's not really clear, but at the end, they need to. Okay, but who the hell is Just Joe by the end? Like,
Well, that was the
what's
thing.
your
Like,
purpose?
why was I there? Apparently, I didn't work for the company, right? Apparently, I wasn't a wrestler because every time they told me I had to wrestle, I was the guy in the backstage going, "I don't want to fight that guy." So I wasn't a wrestler. I didn't even have wrestling gear. I eventually had wrestling gear, but I was always backstage. But I didn't work for the company. Why was I in every arena in the country every time they had Raw and SmackDown and a pay-per-view? I was always backstage, for some reason in the building, but I had no job or function. Like, there was no logic to that gimmick. So surprise, surprise, there was no logic in keeping me around.
Yeah, but to me I don't know, but again, it's really hard to know whatever was going behind the curtain over there. But like, for me, what I will do is like, maybe have you setting up something with a guy, and then at the point maybe there's a title match, and you go like, no, you don't have to fight this match because this guy is gonna hurt you. He has a plan over you. Let me take this, and then you go out there, you have the match, you win the title for whatever reason. So then people can realize, okay, this guy had a plan.
Right.
I don't know, stuff like that.
Have a reason for me to be there. Yeah, have a reason for me to be there. Turns out I'm from corporate. I could have any number of jobs that I'm there, but I was infiltrating the company. Have a reason. But they didn't have a reason. So if there's no reason for me to be there, there's no reason to keep me there.
Yeah, but it also was 2001, which is the peak of the madness in pro wrestling. So
I was in Memphis by the end of 2000. I started in Memphis 2001. I started in Memphis. So I was there from 2000, most of 2000. I think I started there in May or June of 2000, and I finished up the year in 2000. Then I went to Memphis for them. So I was only there for 6-7 months.
Short time.
Yeah,
but that was a period
to move in a good direction, and they kind of got a little bit of value out of it to get the Kurt Hunter thing going, but then they had because that was the focus was, okay, now we've got the Kurt Hunter thing going, then they could dismiss everything else because now we've got this up and running. So in turn, I was just kind of left twisting in the wind because they didn't know what to do after that.
Yeah, also, like you said, it was a little bit of madness. Like, I think in that period of time, they were trying everything as possible just to keep going. Even because WCW is still there, then it ended up like WCW actually died in 2001, and maybe that's another reason why you never got back, because as soon Vince got WCW, he had all these top superstars of WCW.
It was the day he bought WCW I got let go. Me and Jason Sensation specifically, because on top of everything else, he had a whole crew of guys that he could put in main event spots, which is, I get it. They didn't have any immediate plans for me, and there was no risk of me or Jason or anybody else going to WCW or ECW because he pretty much had both those bought up. And then about 2 weeks later, they sacked most of the team. I remember Brian Kendrick was gone, Danielson was gone, Shooter Schultz was gone. The majority of the guys from the Memphis territory were all let go because they didn't have immediate plans for them. And there's no need to pay these guys to stick around because we have, it won't be a year or two before we wind up putting them on TV. And in the meantime, they're going to go and work anyways and make their own money, so we don't have to pay them.
Okay. So, Joe, we are running out of time here, so it's time to finish up the podcast.
Okay.
So, Joe, you always, like I said, you always open for seminar and training and stuff like that. So, how can people get in touch with you? Like your website and Twitter, Facebook, everything. Just let the people know how to find you.
Okay. On Twitter, it's at the Joey Legend. I was just going to put the Joey Legend, but as it turns out, somebody already took that. So,
There's always somebody else having your name.
Yeah, exactly. So if you send stuff to Joey Legend, it's not going to reach me, but the Joey Legend will. If you want to catch me, I've got a bunch of different sites on Facebook. One under my real name, �49ʟᴇɪ, HITCHE. That's the one I look at most. But I also have a Joey Legend one. It's got a white background on the main picture of me with my Japanese belt. So that's kind of my professional page. There's also my author's page, and there's a few fan pages from France and Turkey and stuff like that. And just to email me is legendwrestling@hotmail.com. I'm, like I say, I went to Nigeria to wrestle, and I taught some wrestling there as well during the height of the Ebola scare. So wow. I think it's proof positive that I'm willing to go just about anywhere. and I want to get up to 52 countries before I retire, just because 52 is a running joke with me and my buddies from high school. And even though I'm almost 50, I'm really just 17 with a lot of years of experience. So I've not really matured all that much, and I just want to 52 guys. So yeah, I'm a complete child. So yeah, if anywhere you want to take me, I'm happy to go and teach. And I've got a pretty strong list of students who've done well and who've improved. I'm supposed to be, like I say, going to France regularly for École de Catch in Paris once a month. I also teach at Wrestling Gym Hearts about once every 6 weeks in the Harz, which is a mountain range not far from where I live, just outside Hanover, Germany. I also am a regular trainer at the European Wrestling Promotions in Hanover, directly in Hanover, Germany, and I teach at Wrestling Academy Rohrbus, just outside Zurich. But really, I go just about anywhere and teach seminars. Anybody who will have me, I'm happy to train you. As experienced or as green as you like.
And if for everybody out there, especially promoters, Joe is a great guy. He's really professional and also a very nice guy. Beside
try to be
your knowledge, and maybe let's see, maybe next year we can have you here at my promotion, Pro Wrestling Live events, and let's see. And again, for everybody, just keep following Joe because he's always doing something. And
I'm surprisingly active considering how lazy I am. But yeah, I'm fairly active.
Did you write a book yet?
I have an autobiography in the works. I have a bunch of books on shelves now that are in the fiction section, Marie's World and the like. You can find those on my author's page, the Joey Legend author's page on Facebook and such. I'm co-authored with a girl named Crystal McCarrington. She's really the nuts and bolts of the whole thing. I back clean up and just kind of tidy up some of the wrestling stuff. But she's really the main driving force of any of those books. But I have 41, I think, chapters done of the first book of my autobiography, and so hopefully I'll be getting that out the next year. I'm also involved in several movies and TV series that are upcoming, hopefully 3 of them before the end of the year, if not more. And as those things come to fruition, I'll advertise them. But I don't want to bang the drum too loud now, and then it turns out it doesn't pan out for another 3 years. Then I just look like a guy who's bigging up something that doesn't exist yet. That wouldn't be fair to people.
I'm pretty sure you have a lot of stories because you have been all around the world. So maybe I don't know. Maybe if we're gonna have a second podcast, maybe next year or in 6 months, I don't know, whatever you have time for, we may cover some of your stories, because I'm sure, I mean, you have been in so many different countries, and I'm sure some crazy shit happens somewhere. I mean, it did happen even in Canada, which I'm not have been like in as many places as you, but in those few places I have been, there always happens something crazy. Like in that Canadian tour, as we covered in the beginning of the podcast, that was just crazy enough itself. Having the arena with all the crowd.
Were you there the night we almost got into the bar fight?
I left a couple of days after you join us, or maybe 5
Okay.
days, because I left the day before that Rob left. Because you remember the son of Rob Fuego was getting born.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah,
And-
Rob had to bounce early. I think just he flew out of Winnipeg or something.
Exactly, and
already happy for him.
I left the day before from I don't remember which airport, but it was a very small airport, and I
Yeah.
flew from that very small airport to York, and then from York to Toronto, then from Toronto back home. But yeah, that tour was crazy, and there's so many stories about that tour. And
Oh yeah, that's right. Well, I did a 3-hour spoken word event in England, where basically it was just it was partially a Q&A from the crowd, but also just me telling. So they had a host asking me questions, and I was just, if you ever see like an evening with Kevin Smith, it was that kind of format, and it was just me talking shit, telling stories about the road and all kinds of crazy stuff. I had nothing but great response from it. So I don't know. Hopefully, I'll pick up a few more of those along the way too.
So yeah, like I said, maybe next time we can cover up those things. And again, thank you very much for being my guest today. It was a pleasure. Like I said,
Entirely.
Joe is a great guy, and I can't wait to see you again somewhere. I don't know, maybe my show or some show around Europe. I don't know. Whatever we meet, it will be a pleasure to see you. So thank you again for being my guest, and have a nice
My
day.
pleasure for being here. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Good luck with this whole podcast, and congratulations on the birth of your kid.
Thank you.
European Wrestling Podcast.
I'm �49Belthazar, and you can follow me on Twitter at @Luca_Rusconi. You can also follow me on Facebook on my profile ʿluca_Belthazar, or my page, which is Belthazar Pro Wrestling. I'm also on Instagram, of course, and as always, ʿluca_Belthazar. And all the episodes are gonna be online on YouTube, and also available on my website, which is belthazar.com. And of course, if you are gonna share this episode, please use the hashtag European Wrestling Podcast. As well, if you have any question, again, hashtag European Wrestling Podcast.